The lighting was warm, almost comforting, but the air felt wrong. He sat alone, back straight, fingers lightly grazing the edge of the tablecloth. A waiter approached, quiet, efficient, too efficient. A folded napkin was placed beside the bread plate. Nothing else. No eye contact, just the napkin. He waited a beat, then unfolded it. 6 words, scrawled in hurried ink. "This is a setup. Don't react." His breath caught. He didn't blink. Around him, the clink of glassware, soft laughter, the distant murmur of conversation. A perfect evening. For someone else. He scanned the room slowly. A couple leaning close. A man sipping wine with one hand, phone in the other. Another guest tapping at a laptop, screen tilted just out of view. Nothing looked strange. That was what made it terrifying. His fingers tightened slightly around the napkin. One thought echoed, sharp and cold. Who's watching? And why? Under the golden light of his own restaurant, everything looked staged. The wine glasses sparkled, silverware aligned to perfection, and laughter floated like background music from a scripted show. A folded napkin landed beside his plate. No words, no glance, just a silent delivery. He unfolded it. "This is a setup. Don't react." His chest tightened. The napkin felt heavier than the steak knife beside it. He looked up. No one was watching. Or maybe everyone was. The couple by the window? Too affectionate. The man near the bar? His phone was aimed just a little too precisely. A strange chill crept in. Something here wasn't real. Or worse, it was, but not for him. He swallowed hard. Not from fear, but recognition. The handwriting on that napkin. It hadn't changed in 7 years. Who the hell knew he'd be here tonight? He didn't look like the man whose name graced 6 restaurants across 3 states. Not tonight. Tonight, he was just another diner in a corner booth. No tailored suit, no press smile, no title. But beneath the cap and quiet posture sat Jackson Rivers, age 43, founder of the Aurelia Group. The man who built an empire from scratch, who believed good food and good people were enough. He once cleaned floors in kitchens that didn't know his name. Now, Forbes did. But tonight wasn't about legacy. He stared at the words on the napkin again. This is a setup. Not long ago, Jackson would have laughed it off, called it paranoia. But something had changed. In the way that server moved, in the way his own restaurant suddenly felt unfamiliar. He didn't trust what he saw anymore, not even inside the empire he'd built with his own hands. His eyes drifted toward the front window. The gold lettering still shimmered like the day they first put it up. Aurelia. Clean, confident, timeless. For a moment, the room faded. He saw a younger version of himself, standing outside that same window, laughing with a man whose arm was slung across his shoulders. Eli Cross, business partner, best friend, the one who believed in this dream before it had walls. The memory was quick, a snapshot. 2 men, paint-stained hands, holding cheap champagne and a grand opening sign that wouldn't stay straight. That was 17 years ago. Eli had been gone for 7. The name Aurelia still meant everything. But without Eli, it didn't feel whole. Jackson blinked back to now. The logo blurred for a second before sharpening again. Someone in this room wanted to destroy that name. He just didn't know why. Not yet. 3 weeks ago, it started with a subject line. You need to see what they're doing. No name, no greeting, just a single paragraph and 6 blurry photos. Staff on their phones during service. A server slipping something into a drink. A man in a chef's coat pocketing cash near the register. And one sentence that stopped him cold. Your team thinks you're a joke. Jackson had stared at the images for over an hour. They weren't clear. The angles were off, but they looked real enough to plant doubt. He wanted to believe it was fake. A prank. A jealous rival with too much time. But deep down, something didn't sit right. He knew every corner of his restaurants, every person, every habit. If even half of it was true, everything he built was already cracked. And if it wasn't true... Then someone was working hard to make it look like it was. One of the photos wasn't like the others, blurry, zoomed too far, taken through what looked like a kitchen window, a man in a black blazer, half turned. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, just a silhouette. But Jackson's breath caught. That posture, that scar trailing from temple to jaw, it looked exactly like Eli. He leaned closer, heart pounding. It couldn't be. Eli had died 7 years ago in the fire that destroyed their first restaurant. Jackson had stood at the funeral, spoken to his mother, paid for the headstone. He hadn't seen that face since, and yet the figure in the photo felt too real to ignore. Not just a memory. It was like someone wanted him to see it, to recognize it, to doubt what he thought he knew. Jackson closed the laptop, but the image stayed burned into his mind. What if Eli hadn't died at all? He didn't call a meeting, didn't alert security, didn't even tell his assistant. Instead, he opened the reservation system and booked a table for 1. Friday, 8:00 p.m. Name, J. Reed. It gave him 5 days to prepare. He practiced a slower drawl in the mirror. Bought glasses he didn't need. Let his beard grow just enough to dull recognition. No one could know it was him. Not staff, not guests, not even the managers he trusted most. This wasn't a press visit or quality control. It was something colder, sharper. He had to see the truth, unfiltered. As the week passed, he replayed that photo in his mind again and again. The man who looked like Eli. The restaurant that felt like a lie. Friday was coming fast, and if the email was real, someone inside Aurelia wanted him ruined. Evening. Reservation for Reed, he said, soft southern lilt curling each word. The hostess smiled politely. No hint of recognition. Just a nod and a gesture toward the far corner. He followed, hat low, glasses catching the chandelier's glow. Every detail of the room pulled at him. Chairs he picked himself, tiles he argued over for weeks, music that hadn't changed in years. Yet tonight it all felt distant, like walking through someone else's memory. Keep your voice steady, don't scan the room too fast, don't act like the owner. He sat down, adjusted his silverware, something he used to scold servers about, and glanced up. Everything looked perfect. Almost too perfect. The wine list, the folded napkin, the ambient hum of confidence. But under the surface, something was off. He couldn't name it yet, couldn't point to it, but he could feel it. Something in Aurelia wasn't real anymore. Everything looked exactly the way it should. The wine bottles were turned just right. Candles flickered in sync along the back wall. Table settings were precise, napkins folded sharp, forks aligned. But then came the first crack. A server passed his table. Mid-30s, confident stride, new face. Jackson didn't recognize him. Not from hiring, not from training, not from years of walking every inch of this place. Then another. Blonde, early 20s, name tag slightly crooked. Smiled too wide. Her posture was wrong, stiff, rehearsed. He'd built Aurelia on rhythm, on instinct. And right now, something in that rhythm was off. He watched a third employee fumble the wine opener behind the bar. Wrong grip, wrong angle. They looked like staff, moved like staff, but something told him they weren't. Not his, not real, not Aurelia. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Aurelia. Can I start you with still or sparkling water? Her voice was calm, polished, like every greeting she'd ever given, but Jackson knew that voice. Sienna. She'd been with him since year 2. Started as a hostess, moved up fast, loyal, sharp, one of the few he trusted without question. But tonight, she didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't show even a flicker of recognition. He almost responded with her name, caught himself. Still, please, he said, keeping his tone flat. She nodded, wrote nothing down, and walked away. Not a glance, not a whisper, not a single tell. She was playing along, which meant she knew. And if she knew, then this went deeper than he thought. For the first time, he wasn't just suspicious. He was sure. Something was happening here, and Sienna was in it. She returned with a glass of still water. No words, just a soft smile and precise placement on the table. Then, without pause, she set down a second napkin, folded neatly, same as before. She didn't linger, didn't look at him, just turned and walked away. Jackson waited a beat, then reached for it. This time, the message was longer. "Cameras everywhere. Most customers are actors. Don't react." His throat went dry. Actors? He looked around again, slower this time. The laughing couple, the man at the bar, the woman near the kitchen pretending to scroll. Everyone looked normal. Too normal. Like they were trying to blend in without knowing how. It wasn't just hidden cameras, it was a production. He folded the napkin, slid it under his plate, and forced himself to breathe. Who was behind it? And how long had they been watching? The man at the next table was alone, middle-aged, clean blazer, wedding ring, but no partner. Nothing unusual, until Jackson noticed the way his fingers kept adjusting his jacket. Not nervously, precisely. The top button glinted under the light. Too shiny, too still. Jackson leaned back slightly, angling his line of sight. The button wasn't fabric, it was glass, a lens. The man pretended to sip his wine, but his eyes kept drifting, toward Jackson, not the menu. Jackson looked away, kept his face neutral, heart steady. So it was real. The email, the napkin, the actors. This wasn't surveillance, it was documentation. Someone wanted footage of him. Every blink, every breath, every possible reaction. But for what? And who would spend this much to catch him on camera? He kept his posture relaxed, his voice silent. Inside, his mind was moving fast. If one camera was on him, how many others were already rolling? Across from him, a couple sat shoulder to shoulder, leaning in, smiling too often, too perfectly. Their drinks remained untouched. Jackson's eyes dropped to the phone on their table, angled upward, screen dark, camera lens pointed straight at him. Not subtle, not accidental. They laughed at nothing, whispered lines that felt rehearsed. One of them checked their watch, then nodded as if on cue. This wasn't just surveillance, it was framed observation. Every reaction he gave, every glance, frown, or pause could be clipped, edited, twisted. He straightened slightly, adjusting his napkin like any ordinary guest, but his jaw clenched. He didn't know their names, had never seen their faces in staff training files, nor on any reservation list he could recall. And yet, here they were. Two strangers playing lovers, aiming a phone like a scope. How many stories were being written about him right now, without him saying a single word? The sound came fast. Glass tipping, liquid splashing, a sharp gasp. A woman near the center of the dining room shot up from her chair, her cream-colored dress now stained deep red. She screamed loud enough to turn heads across the room. "I can't believe this," she shouted, hands in the air, voice shaking. A waiter apologized over and over, fumbling with napkins. Too clumsy. Too late. Phones were already out. One guest had gone live. Jackson caught the glowing red icon on their screen. A dozen others followed. Suddenly, the room wasn't just reacting, it was recording. The woman kept yelling, louder now, gesturing toward the bar, the kitchen, the ceiling. Theatrical, deliberate. Jackson stayed still, eyes low, mind racing. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography. And if this was the opening act, what exactly were they building toward? Near the far wall, a man stood abruptly, chair scraping hard against the floor. "This is garbage," he barked, holding up a half-eaten plate. "The food's cold. The service is a joke." His voice cut through the room like a blade. The server stammered, trying to respond, but the man stepped closer, finger pointed. Faces turned. Conversations stopped. Phones lifted again. "You call this a fine dining experience? I've had better at gas stations." Someone at a nearby table murmured agreement. Another nodded, hesitant but loud enough to count. The ripple had begun. It wasn't about the food. Jackson knew that. It was about escalation, manufacturing outrage, making it feel like momentum. He glanced toward the kitchen. Staff moved faster now, not with precision, but panic. This wasn't one guest with a complaint. It was a stage, and the audience was already choosing sides. He drew a slow breath, steadying his hands beneath the table. Heartbeat loud. Not panic, focus. He scanned the room again, slower this time. The man at the bar, pretending to scroll. The couple by the window, whispering lines that didn't land. The server near the kitchen, waiting for her cue with empty hands. They weren't guests, they were performers. Every movement is calculated, every glance rehearsed, every camera waiting. He saw the shift now, not in the food, not in the service, but in the silence between actions. The way reactions fell too perfectly into place, like a script unfolding in real time. He wasn't dining, he was being filmed, trapped inside a narrative that someone else had written, and every second he stayed silent was one more second they controlled the story. Sienna returned with a calm smile and a folded check. She placed it gently beside his plate. No words, just routine. Jackson reached for it slowly, fingers steady. Inside, not a receipt, just a handwritten note tucked between two blank slips. "I'm recording, too. There's a second live stream. Keep calm." His eyes didn't move, but something inside him shifted. Not everyone here was against him. Someone was still on his side. He folded the paper back into the check presenter, slid it under his palm, and nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Around him, the scene played on. A raised voice at table 4, a spilled drink near the hallway. Another phone held just a little too high, but now he knew something else. They weren't the only ones watching, and maybe, for the first time tonight, he wasn't alone in this. A sudden scream tore through the room. "I'm allergic!" The woman at table 6 clutched her throat, eyes wide, voice strained. "Something in the sauce, I can't breathe." She stumbled back, knocking over her chair. Red blotches began appearing on her neck. Fast, visible, almost too perfect. Gasps spread like fire. A man beside her, maybe a boyfriend, maybe not, shouted for help. "She needs an EpiPen! Someone call 911! Other guests rose to their feet. Panic rippled. Servers looked lost, frozen. Phones went up again. One live-streamed the scene with a shaking caption. "Fine dining nearly kills woman over allergy." Jackson stayed seated, eyes fixed on the woman. Her hands trembled just enough to sell the fear, but her breathing was steady. No sweat, no wheezing. He'd seen real reactions before. This wasn't one, it was a performance, staged for outrage. And it was working. A voice erupted from the kitchen, harsh, furious. "Get it right, or get out of my kitchen!" It echoed through the restaurant, loud enough for every table to hear. Jackson turned slightly, catching a glimpse through the pass window. A man in a chef's coat stood shouting at a younger cook, gesturing wildly with a ladle in one hand. The staff froze. Guests stared. Another wave of cameras lifted. But Jackson didn't flinch. Because that wasn't Roberto. Roberto had been head chef at Aurelia for 5 years. Brilliant, focused, and completely mute since a car accident 2 years ago. He hadn't spoken a word since. The man yelling in the kitchen wore Roberto's coat, had his build, his haircut. But it wasn't him. It was an actor, planted for drama. The lie wasn't just in the words, it was in the volume. And now, Jackson knew someone was rewriting his restaurant's reality from the inside out. A loud crash shattered the tense silence. A server, young, wide-eyed, had tripped near table 12. A full bowl of soup launched from her tray and spilled across a guest's open laptop. Steam rose. So did voices. "My files!" the man shouted, pushing back from the table. His hands flailed, frantic. His screen now dripped broth and something else. Jackson squinted. Floating in the mess, unmistakably clear, a cockroach. Legs curled, body limp, riding the oily surface like a final insult. Gasps exploded around the room. Phones zoomed in. Someone screamed. "This place is disgusting," the man cried, pointing at the soup. "Is that even food?" The woman next to him began dry heaving, hands over her mouth. Jackson's stomach clenched, not from nausea, but fury. That insect hadn't come from his kitchen. It had come from a script, planted perfectly, timed precisely, designed to go viral. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography. The fake allergy, the screaming chef, the roach in the soup, every beat hit with surgical timing. Too clean, too exact. Jackson leaned back in his seat, forcing a sip of water to steady his breath. Someone's directing this. This isn't about one bad review. It's an execution, a takedown. His eyes moved across the room. The performers weren't reacting, they were delivering. Guests weren't panicking, they were amplifying. Each moment was louder than the last, and every camera was pointed at him. The man behind this didn't just want to ruin Aurelia, he wanted Jackson to break, to lose composure, to lash out, to give them the perfect villain on camera. But he wouldn't. Not yet. Because now he was sure of one thing. This was personal. Jackson's eyes scanned the far side of the room. Near the bar, half shielded behind a tall plant, stood a man adjusting a camera rig. He wore a sharp navy blazer, calm in the storm, hands steady, eyes focused. Directing, not filming. Then he turned, and Jackson's blood ran cold. Sharp jawline, a faint scar above the left brow. Those cold, calculating eyes. Eli Cross, alive. Jackson's pulse thudded in his ears. For a second, the room disappeared. The servers, the guests, the noise. Just that face. 7 years ago, Eli had died in a fire. Their first restaurant reduced to ash. An accident. Or so Jackson believed. He'd buried a casket, delivered a eulogy, cried for the man who was once his closest friend. Now that ghost stood 20 feet away, orchestrating Jackson's destruction with chilling ease. Eli looked up, met Jackson's stare, and smirked. This wasn't a setup. It was a resurrection. Jackson froze. His hand tightened around the glass, knuckles white. But his mind was no longer in the restaurant. It was 7 years ago. A smaller space, dim lights, loud laughter. Aurelia's first location, just him and Eli, sleeves rolled, dreaming big. They built it from scratch. Spent nights scrubbing floors, arguing over wine lists, falling asleep on crates of produce. Eli was more than a partner. He was family. Then came the fire. A faulty wire, or so the report said. The building collapsed before sunrise. Eli was inside. Or so everyone believed. Jackson remembered the funeral, the closed casket, the guilt. He'd spoken to an empty box, voice shaking, thinking he'd failed his best friend. Now, that same best friend stood across the room, alive, calm, and targeting him. What had happened that night, and what turned Eli into this? Jackson's heart pounded with one question. Had he ever really known him at all? Eli didn't look away. He raised his wine glass slowly, deliberate. Eyes locked on Jackson's. Not a toast, a challenge. The overhead lights caught the red swirl of Pinot as the glass tilted. His expression never shifted. Calm, calculated, cold. Then came the smirk. That signature Eli grin, once full of charm, now hollow, weaponized. Jackson felt a chill crawl down his spine. A tiny red light blinked near Eli's table. One of the hidden cameras zoomed in, centering on Jackson's face, framing his shock, his silence. He was being cornered, emotionally, visually, publicly. Across the room, actors kept up their chaos. But for Jackson, time narrowed to one frame. Eli. Wine. The unspoken message behind the stare. "You're on my stage now." Jackson clenched his jaw, held his stare. If Eli wanted a show, he'd get one. But it wouldn't end the way he planned. Sienna appeared again, her steps precise, voice low but urgent as she set down a dessert menu Jackson hadn't asked for. "Don't look up," she whispered without moving her lips. 12 cameras. They're live streaming. The whole setup's meant to break you, in public. Jackson's hands froze mid-motion. 12. Every blink now felt monitored, every twitch a potential meme. Sienna kept her composure, eyes scanning the room. They want humiliation, not truth. You cry, explode, beg, it's all content. He nodded slightly, his pulse pounding in his ears. He couldn't let them win, couldn't give them a second of weakness. Outside, the world was watching a train wreck they thought was real. Inside, Jackson felt a storm gathering. Rage, betrayal, but also clarity. Sienna took the menu back. Her parting whisper, "They think you're cornered. You're not." Jackson exhaled slowly. If they were going to air his downfall, they'd better be ready for the sequel. Jackson's fingers trembled under the table, barely brushing the fork. But on the surface, calm. He sliced into the steak with practiced ease, chewed, swallowed, eyes half-lidded, expression unreadable, as if he were just another man savoring dinner. Inside, his mind raced, every breath timed, every movement rehearsed for the invisible audience. He could feel Eli's eyes on him. Cameras tracked his every blink. He chewed again, this time slower, the taste fading beneath adrenaline. From the corner of his eye, a lens focused in tighter. Let them watch. Let them record every second of what they thought was his unraveling. He wouldn't flinch. Not yet. Suspense wasn't just noise. It was silence that stretched. That gripped. And right now, Jackson was the still point in a hurricane of lies. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly, deliberately, pulled out his phone. For a second, he stared at the screen, then tapped, "Go live," no filters, no angle, just truth. The camera opened on his face, calm and centered. His voice steady but low enough to make people lean in. "They've been watching me all night. Now it's time they get watched back." He angled the camera across the dining room. The fake guests, the planted chaos, the actors mid-scene. "They want you to see a meltdown, a scandal. But here's what's really happening." He paused, eyes sharp. "This restaurant was built on something real, and now someone's trying to bury that, with lies, cameras, and cheap tricks." He looked directly into the lens. "My name is Jackson Rivers, founder of Aurelia. And tonight, you're going to see the truth." The live stream war had officially begun. Jackson angled the camera toward the woman still clutching her throat, the red marks now oddly faded. "She claimed a shellfish allergy," he said calmly. "Said it was the sauce." Then he turned the camera back to himself. "But here's the thing. Aurelia doesn't serve seafood on Fridays. We never have. It's in our staff manual. It's on our prep schedule. Ask any real employee." His voice sharpened, not loud, just surgical. "So, either she's lying, or she's reacting to an ingredient we never used." He zoomed in slightly on the untouched plate at her table. No bite marks, no utensils moved. No waiter ever served that dish. Gasps rose from nearby tables. Not actors this time, but real diners starting to connect the dots. Jackson met the lens again. "You wanted a scandal? Fine. Let's start with the script you forgot to double-check." The truth wasn't just out. It was live. Jackson turned his phone toward the kitchen pass. Moments earlier, the man in the chef's coat had been shouting orders. Now he stood still, back turned, pretending to plate something. "That man just screamed at his staff," Jackson said, voice controlled. "Slammed a ladle, put on a show." He paused. "But the real Roberto, our executive chef, hasn't spoken a word in 2 years. He lost his voice in a car accident. Vocal cords damaged. Permanent." A beat of silence. Then, "So, either that's a medical miracle, or that man is an actor." Gasps, murmurs. Even some cameras lowered. Jackson walked a few steps closer, keeping his phone steady. "We don't hire frauds in our kitchen. We don't fake meltdowns." He looked straight into the lens. They planted him, just like they planted the rest. The lie wasn't slipping anymore. It was unraveling. Jackson glanced down at his screen, tapped once, then held the phone up for all to see. A preloaded video began to play. Grainy, black and white, time-stamped 2 nights ago. A dimly lit warehouse, folding chairs, a table stacked with envelopes. Eli stood at the center, calm, confident. Around him, familiar faces, servers, guests, even the woman with the allergy scene, lined up one by one. As each approached, Eli handed them a white envelope. No handshakes, no names, just payment. Then came the audio, muffled but clear enough. "Remember your mark. Jackson sits at table 5. We start with the spill, then allergy, then the roach." Gasps filled the restaurant. Someone whispered, "That's the guy from earlier." Jackson muted the clip and stared into his live stream. This isn't drama. This is premeditated sabotage. This is Eli Cross buying a downfall. The room was no longer watching a performance. They were witnessing an exposé, and Eli was the lead villain. From behind the bar, Sienna stepped forward, phone in hand. No words, just action. She mirrored Jackson's live stream and tapped to share her screen. A second feed lit up. It was her own hidden camera, running the entire night. Viewers, both in the restaurant and online, watched from a new angle. Eli pacing behind a privacy divider, whispering cues into a wireless mic, pointing to actors, nodding on cue as each scene unfolded. There he was, signaling the soup spill, giving the thumbs up after the allergy act, mouthing lines seconds before the roach was revealed, and then the clearest shot. Eli watching Jackson, eyes locked, face cold, while the room spun around them. The sound kicked in, low but undeniable. Wait for him to crack. Get the eyes. That's the moment. Sienna looked to Jackson and nodded once. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. It was caught, live, from both sides. The truth had its own broadcast now. The front doors burst open. Federal agents in dark jackets swept into the restaurant, firm and fast. The noise of the crowd vanished, replaced by gasps, chairs scraping, phones dropping. All eyes turned. Eli froze mid-step near the bar, hand still on his earpiece. "Eli Cross, you're under arrest. Step away from the equipment." He didn't move, just blinked once, the smirk finally gone. Two agents grabbed his arms, twisted them back, and locked the cuffs tight. The camera he'd been watching from hit the floor with a thud. Guests, real and fake, watched in stunned silence. Then, as if on cue, applause broke out. From one table, then another. Online, Jackson's viewer count exploded past 80,000. Comments flooded in, "Justice. I knew something was off. This is insane." As Eli was led out, Jackson's stream held steady. The takedown had been televised. But the redemption? That was live too. As the agents guided Eli past him, Jackson stood, quiet, composed, camera still rolling. For a moment, their eyes met again. No crowds, no noise, just the two of them, caught in a silence louder than any accusation. Jackson's voice was low, almost a whisper, just loud enough for the mic and Eli. "7 years ago, I carried guilt, because I thought I let you die." He paused, let the weight settle. "But now I know." He stepped closer, eyes steady. "I wasn't your friend. I was your target." Eli didn't respond, just stared, jaw tense like a man who'd rehearsed every line except this one. No clever retort, no final twist. Only the sound of cuffs tightening and truth cutting deeper than betrayal ever could. Sometimes closure isn't loud. It just leaves nothing left to say. Jackson sat back down, live stream still rolling. No speech, no performance, just quiet presence. His phone buzzed nonstop, notifications flooding in like a tide turning. Just hours ago, the comments were venom. Fraud. "Shut him down. Aurelia's over." Now? This man stayed calm in hell. Respect just skyrocketed. "I'd eat at his place tomorrow. Dude's a legend." The hashtags flipped midstream. #expose Aurelia was replaced by #respect Jackson. #fake chef became #real owner. Thousands shared the clip of him calmly chewing steak as chaos burned around him. The same crowd that once came for his downfall now stood in awe of his control, his restraint, his truth. Not because he shouted, not because he fought back, because he didn't flinch. He didn't just survive the ambush, he rewrote the ending. By morning, every major outlet had picked it up. CEO outs sabotage plot on livestream, exposes ex-partner as mastermind. Jackson Rivers turns ambush into victory. Live justice. Restaurant owner unmasks betrayal in real time. Screens flashed headlines over Jackson's steady frame at table 5, holding the camera, voice calm, truth razor sharp. Clips of Eli being cuffed. The fake chef's meltdown. The planted roach, dissected frame by frame. Commentators praised his restraint. Crisis experts called it a masterclass in public control. Morning shows ran highlight reels of Jackson's quote, "Now it's time to get watched back." His name wasn't trending for scandal anymore, it was trending for strength. No longer the silent CEO. Now, the man who didn't blink. The narrative had changed hands, and Jackson hadn't just protected his restaurant, he'd reclaimed his identity. Jackson glanced at his phone, still buzzing, still live. He let it run for one final second, then ended the stream with a single tap. No farewell, no words, just quiet. The restaurant around him was slowly returning to normal. Guests whispering, staff cleaning. The chaos fading like smoke after fire. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked. No applause, no spotlight. Each step steady, slow, leading him past tables that had once staged his downfall. He passed the wine bar, the window, the chair where Eli had once sat smiling. Then, through the back hallway, toward his office. No cameras followed, no reporters shouted his name, only his footsteps, echoing softly on tile. It wasn't victory he carried. It was release. And sometimes, the loudest ending is the one walked out in silence. Jackson entered his office, closed the door behind him, and exhaled slowly. The room was still, familiar, unchanged. He moved to the desk, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a worn photograph. 2 men stood shoulder to shoulder, him and Eli. Younger, smiling, arms around each other outside the first Aurelia location, back when everything was built on trust. He stared at it for a moment. No anger, no regret, just weight, the kind only time and betrayal can leave behind. His thumb brushed the corner gently, then he slid the photo back into the drawer, closed it, locked it, not to forget, but to let go. Some ghosts didn't deserve to be chased, and some memories were meant to stay in the past. Jackson stepped out of the office, the hallway now quiet. Sienna was near the bar, tidying menus, already resetting the night like nothing had happened. He walked toward her, stopped just a few feet away. She looked up, sharp as always, but softer now, the mask gone. He gave a small nod, voice steady but low enough to stay between them. "If I had a few more like you," he let the pause linger, "I wouldn't need a PR team." She blinked, surprised, but said nothing. Just smiled, barely. Jackson meant every word. Not a compliment, not a reward, a truth. Loyalty didn't need a spotlight, it just needed to be seen. He turned to walk away, but her voice followed him, warm. "You've got one, that's a start." Some reputations are rebuilt with cameras. Others, with people who never stop believing. Jackson reached into his pocket, then held out a small silver key, worn, familiar. Sienna looked at it, confused for a second. Then her eyes widened. He placed it gently in her palm. No ceremony, no big speech. "From now on," he said, "you run the floor." She didn't respond right away, just stared at the key, silent weight in her hand. "You've already been doing it," he added, quieter. "Now it's just official." She looked up, and for the first time all night her voice caught slightly. "You sure?" Jackson nodded once. "I trust you." That was all she needed. The key wasn't just for locks, it was a shift in power, in belief. She'd gone from server to shield, from support to leadership. And now, Sienna wasn't just holding a key, she was holding the future of Aurelia. Jackson stood alone near the center of the dining room. Chairs tucked in, tables cleared, the noise long gone. One by one, the lights above dimmed, soft clicks echoing like distant footsteps, until only one glow remained. Outside the window, the golden sign, Aurelia, lit the glass. Its reflection reached across the floor, casting a warm line up his chest across his jaw. It caught his eyes last. He didn't smile. He didn't move. Just stood there, still, grounded, bathed in the light of a name that had almost been torn apart. There were no cheers, no audience left. Just the hum of silence and the pulse of quiet endurance. This wasn't about victory. It was about what remained standing after the firestorm passed. And tonight, that was him. Jackson Rivers, unchanged, but never the same. Jackson's voice returned, calm, quiet, steady. Not to a crowd, but to the lens of his phone, now recording one final message. Reputation can be stolen, twisted, faked. He paused. But character? He looked straight into the camera. No one can take that from you. His face held the weight of every moment lived that night. And if the world believes a lie about you, will you stay silent? Or will you stand? The screen faded slowly to black, but his voice lingered. If you've ever been misunderstood, if you've ever been judged before you could speak, comment "Me Too," because you're not alone. Silence. Then, like ripples, notifications began. One comment, then dozens, then hundreds. Me too, me too, me too. Truth doesn't just survive, it connects.